I'm going to bring the latest information to our viewers. The Pierce County Sheriff is tweeting, and Sheriff, we hear you loud and clear. He's saying, I'm working with the FBI and military. All the information sent out here is confirmed. Sheriff Paul Pastor will be the contact. Okay, here's what we know at what is still a fairly early hour in this developing story. We know that a plane was stolen. It was stolen by a mechanic working at SeaTac. That's the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport in Washington State, so northwestern United States for our international viewers. That plane took off, and two F-15 fighter jets were scrambled, but they did not shoot it down. Again, according to the county sheriff, they were not involved in the crash. The reason the plane crashed, according to the sheriff, is because of the lack of flying skills of the mechanic who had taken it and flown the place in the first place. Also, vital information, if you're just catching up on this, if you're just joining us, there were no passengers and staff, no one else aboard this plane. It was a Q400. Let's get to CNN safety analyst David Soucy. He's on the phone from Denver, Colorado. Tell us a little bit about the type of plane, the Q400.
Well, the Q400 is a twin turboprop. It's one that has had some kind of issues with some icing and things like that in the past, but it's a great airplane. It's a good backbone airplane for a lot of commuter airlines right now.
Have you ever seen anything like this? Have you ever been called up to report on a story that even remotely resembles this one?
Yeah, actually, I've investigated an accident like this one time. There was
a suicide flight?
Well, yeah, it wasn't really a suicide flight, and as Josh was saying, it may have just been from the lack of skill of the mechanic. But mechanics often routinely can take aircraft out.
But David, respectfully, if you have lack of skill and you don't know how to fly a plane, and then you steal a plane, that's what many would see as a suicide flight, because you know you're not going to land it, right?
Well, that's a good possibility, but we just don't know what he was thinking or what he was doing. I would be more concerned about his intent, and again, it would have been suicide, but I think the public safety issue is the biggest concern of anyone right now, is what was his intent when he took that airplane. It wasn't just for a joy flight, that's for sure, and if it was suicide, there's other ways to go.
So clarify that for me. What do you mean by what was his intent?
Well, it was his intent to get the aircraft up and then put it into a populated area. The public safety aspect is my biggest concern with that, because he's got a weapon on his hands at that point, and could very well be dangerous for many people on the ground.
What is your thinking based on what we know? And I know it's sketchy.
Well, it's too early to say anything, really, as again, we don't know what he was doing, but my early take on this is that a mechanic it is a vulnerability for the airlines and for our whole industry right now, is that the ability for a mechanic to take an aircraft out alone. Now, there is protocol where he should not have been in that airplane alone at all. If he was taxiing out and asked for clearance to get to the taxiway, that airplane would have been stopped long before it got to a runway to take off, and should have been at SeaTac, unless he was telling the tower something different, telling them a story that I've got to go out and run this aircraft, I'm going to test the engines, et cetera, et cetera. And that mechanics have pretty free reign to do that. And so this one went a little bit further.
So when you say this was a vulnerability for the industry, do you mean that before today you had it in mind that mechanics were perhaps in a kind of were in a position to perhaps exploit a loophole or a weakness in the whole security system?
Yes, I do. I think that's something that it is something that I've thought of before. It's something that security experts have talked about before, and that's why there's protocol that no mechanic should be taxiing an aircraft on a live runway area, or even on taxi anywhere on the tarmac, without two people in the aircraft. So how he got in that aircraft himself, by himself, and got clearance to go out, that's the vulnerability, the fact that they didn't follow protocol. There needs to be tightened rein on this.
David, stay with me. I want to bring you updates. They're coming to us from the Pierce County Sheriff. First of all, the last one that he put up was just moments ago. All right, so this one first. Follow this thread for official info. This is not a terrorist incident. Confirmed info. This is a single suicide male. We know who he is. No others involved. So that's important. Not a terrorist incident. David, I know you were saying that he's got that improvised pilot, that mechanic cum pilot, had a weapon in his hands, but The sheriff is telling us that they're working background on him. He's a 29-year-old suicidal male, and that this was not a terrorist incident. I also want to bring you this last one. The tweet by the sheriff told that the F-15s made it within a few minutes of theft of the plane. Pilots kept plane out of harm's way, and people on the ground are safe. Yay, Air Force. They may not admit for a few days, but it's true. Look, that's got to put a smile on anybody's face who's been following this story.
Yes, absolutely. And ever since 9/11, the response time of these military jets is so quick, especially around that Seattle area and around any large metropolitan area. If there's an aircraft that's off radar, if there's an aircraft that's not supposed to be there, does not have authorization, it's amazing how quickly they could respond to that.
What's the protocol for that? What are they supposed to do?
The protocol is to fly and monitor, and you fly and monitor to see what the direction of the aircraft is. So you identify what the hazard areas are, when they could risk and go over highly populated areas and that sort of thing. So the aircraft, they try to guide the aircraft. They get close to it on one side and push the aircraft one way or the other, making the pilot nervous to say, hey, I'm not going to get hit if I keep going that way. So they actually guide them away from the cities and guide them away. And if the aircraft is not an imminent danger to a high population, they'll just let that aircraft fly and run out of gas if it has to. But if it's going to harm anyone at that point, they are authorized to shoot that aircraft down.